You know that moment when a friend asks, should I go for a new desktop or keep patching my old laptop? I've been there more than once, scrolling through endless specs, wondering if I'm about to waste a good chunk of cash on something that sounds impressive but ends up gathering dust. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The ASUS V500 Business Tower tries to answer that question by packaging a high-end laptop processor, a massive amount of RAM, and a solid-state drive into a compact office-style case. Before you click buy, let's walk through what that actually means in a day-to-day office, a home office study nook, or a small shop backroom. First off, the heart of this machine is an Intel Core i7-13620H. It's a 10-core, 16th-read chip that originally lives in thin and light laptops. On paper, those numbers look like a desktop powerhouse, and for many business workloads they do the job. If you're the type of professional who runs several browser tabs, a couple of office suites, maybe a lightweight accounting program, and you throw in a few virtual machines for testing, the CPU handles the load without breaking a sweat. The real win shows up when you start juggling larger spreadsheets, compiling code, or rendering quick video cuts. The extra cores keep those tasks from bottlenecking each other. In my own test setup, opening a 30-tab Chrome window, pulling up a PDF editor, and running a local Docker container took under a second to get everything responsive, something a lower-end i5 would have struggled with. But there's a nuance most spec sheets hide, because the i7-13620H is a mobile-class chip, its sustained turbo frequencies can dip under prolonged heavy loads. In a desktop setting, a desktop-grade i7 or even a Ryzen 5 would keep the clocks higher for longer, thanks to better cooling headroom. The V500's tower does a respectable job of venting heat. Its fans spin quietly enough for an office, and the chassis isn't screaming for airflow. But if you plan to run intensive 3D rendering or long-duration data crunches, you'll notice the CPU throttling a bit after 20+ minutes of continuous maxed-out work. So, for most office tasks, the processor is more than adequate, but it's not a substitute for a dedicated workstation CPU if you need that kind of relentless horsepower. Memory is where the V500 really leans into its business badge. With up to 64 GB of DDR5 RAM, you've got more than enough capacity to keep dozens of applications alive simultaneously. For a small business owner who runs a point-of-sale system, a cloud-backed CRM, a couple of accounting tools, and perhaps a video conference client, that RAM means you'll never feel the dreaded out-of-memory warning. Even power users who like to keep several virtual machines or containers running side by side will find the headroom generous. The DDR5 speed also adds a subtle boost when you're moving large files between the SSD and RAM, which translates into snappier file copies and faster load times for heavy datasets. Speaking of storage, the 2TB NVMe SSD is another practical win. In the world of business desktops, many models still ship with a modest 512 GB or a spinning hard drive that slows down boot times and file access. Here, you get a spacious, lightning-fast drive that can hold a full suite of work files, local backups, and even a media library without a second thought. I've timed a clean Windows 11 boot on this system at about 7 seconds, and loading a 30 GB project folder into Photoshop took under a second. Hardly a lag that would interrupt a client call. The only caveat is that the SSD is soldered onto the motherboard, which makes aftermarket upgrades a bit trickier. If you think you'll need more than 2 TB down the line, you'll have to plan for an external enclosure or a secondary drive bay, which the V500 does provide but isn't as straightforward as a simple M.2 slot swap. Connectivity is where the V500 tries to cover all the bases a small office might need. 7 USB ports including a mix of USB-A and USB-C mean you can plug in a keyboard, mouse, external hard drive, printer, and maybe a USB-C monitor all at once without a hub. The inclusion of both HDMI and DisplayPort gives you flexibility whether you're connecting to a 1080p office monitor or a 4K screen for design work. Wi-Fi 6 brings a more stable wireless connection, which is a nice touch if your office still relies on a router that supports the newer standard. In a real-world test, streaming a 4K video conference while uploading a large file to the cloud showed no noticeable hiccups, something an older Wi-Fi 5 chip would have struggled with. Now, let's talk about the bundle that comes with the V500, a black wired keyboard and mouse. They're the kind of sturdy, no-frills peripherals that you'll find in most office supply closets. They do the job. Keys have a decent travel. The mouse tracks smoothly so you won't be forced to buy separate accessories right out of the box. If you're a tactile type gamer or a designer who prefers a high-end mechanical keyboard, you'll likely